listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change. Now this is part 2 of When Love Really Goes Wrong. And in the last episode, When Love Really Goes Wrong, part 1, I spoke about the narcissistic personality disorder and what happens when we find ourselves in a relationship with someone with that problem. Now, in this particular episode, I want to focus on the other prevalent, well, not so prevalent in some ways, personality issue, which is that of the borderline personality. And really, it's in some ways similar to the narcissistic personality disorder, but on another level, it's actually very, very different. And in understanding this, I think we can learn to not react in an overly judgmental and negatively reactive way. Because we do have some positive issues here. One is that if the person takes accountability for their behaviour, the capacity for them to actually engage in therapy and change are really quite good. The challenge is for the person to have that insight that, hey, it's not just my partner. I've got a role to play here. And in fact, I'm often the person who instigates this. So what is it that we're talking about when we talk about the borderline personality? So let me talk a little bit about the causes of personality disorders, and particularly with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and BPD, borderline personality disorder. One of the key issues that I, as a therapist, and also the research keeps pointing out, is that there's some sort of attachment issue where the person is actually insecurely attached rather than securely attached in their parental relationships. But more importantly, often with the person with a borderline personality disorder is that they have experienced one or more childhood traumas. And so this is important in understanding how a person like that can be helped. Again, if we understand the dynamics as a therapist, as a helper, as a clinician, then we can really assist that person. I want to get the message out that if you somehow identify with this or these two particular disorders, I want to reassure you that this isn't coming from a judgmental place, but rather from a place that, you can change. And if you're the partner of someone with this problem, it can also give you, up to a certain point, a level of optimism that the person can actually really work through the relevant underlying issues that trigger them off the way that they do. So let me give you a bit of an overview about how this condition can actually really interfere with your life or the life of your partner. Okay, so if you're the person whose lived experience is that of the borderline personality disorder, one of the things that you more than likely have experienced is that some of the main areas in your life have been either moderately or significantly affected, negatively affected. They usually fall into the categories of intimate relationship, jobs, school, social activities, self-image. And so, we often see people going through repeated job changes or losses. They don't necessarily complete an education, although in a lot of instances the person's actually, very intelligent and could be quite academically successful if they were able to regulate both their emotions and their whole sort of approach to life better. In some cases, I see people who've got, a series of legal issues going on and in some extreme cases, even jail. Intimate relationships, as I said before, generally are marred by a high level of stress, and separation and divorce is a common picture for the person. In in a lot of instances, the person with a borderline personality will also look at self-injuring, such as cutting, burning, frequent hospitalizations. And, ironically, the person who is so afraid of a rejection and abandonment, which is one of the core issues in dealing with a borderline personality, is that I am constantly afraid that no one's going to accept me, that everybody's going to reject me, and that eventually I'm going to be completely and utterly abandoned. They frequently get into relationships that are actually abusive. And so there's a pattern that evolves. So in this context, the person frequently experiences things like anxiety, depression, alcohol and drug or substance misuse or abuse are frequent. Due to making difficult or poor choices, the person often experiences also post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's a number of factors that are particularly relevant in this area. So what do we then see when the person with this particular challenge is in a relationship? Well, in the literature, there's an interesting cycle that's been talked about, and certainly as a therapist, I see this very, very often. And what it comes down to is essentially 6 stages for the person in their relationship. So stage 1, the person begins a new relationship, and while the relationship appears to be relatively positive, it's also seen as moving very, very, very quickly. So quite often I'll get clients saying to me, it was like we had known each other all our lives. Now that might sound very romantic, but in my instance, I usually flag that it's a bit of a red flag. And there's often frequently a very quick decision or desire to build a future together. The person with the borderline personality disorder will then idolize the relationship simply based on a few encounters, a few dates. And they become quite fixated at this point on their partner or their perceived partner. In stage 2, the BPD partner becomes increasingly sensitive to everything that their partner says or does. And this goes through quite a negative filter. We're not talking about seeing things in a very positive light. So at this stage is when we begin to see the beginnings of that manifestation of fear of abandonment and also not feeling worthwhile at all. Okay, so as we move towards stage 3, the partner with BPD sets up situations in the relationship that pushes their partner to demonstrate their love for them. Their goal is simply to feel worthwhile and to put a stop on this anxiety by manipulating the other person to show affection. As we head into stage 4, there's a level of inconsistency and instability that begins to cause real friction and discord in the relationship. There may also be a whole bunch of other issues causing that anxiety to come back more intensely. The partner without BPD may appear calm and happy, but by this stage, their needs are probably not being met in the relationship. And this creates an even bigger problem. So the relationship now heads into the next stage, stage 5. Now, at this stage, the non-BPD partner has either thought about or has decided to put in plans to leave the relationship. The BPD partner, on the other hand, may try to explain and make excuses for what's going on in the relationship, but the non-BPD partner is essentially generally checking out. Now, there is a permutation on this because in a number of cases that I've worked with, I've seen this particular cycle flip over again and again and again. So stage 5 might become a bit of a cycle in of itself. So, as the non-BPD partner is making decisions to leave the relationship, the BPD partner will start to try and negotiate why their partner should stay, that, they're either being misunderstood or they will try to do better. There's a real play at work in negotiating the non-BPD partner to stay. Now, if worse comes to worse, one of the things that can happen at this stage is that the partner threatens self-harm and or suicide. And so some non-BPD partners get really, really scared and at this stage go, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And this is often where I see people coming into either couples therapy or the non-BPD partner goes into therapy themselves, frequently trying to figure out what is it that they are doing that's really triggering their partner off. And there usually is some stuff, but ultimately, unless their partner with BPD goes into therapy themselves, this becomes a fruitless exercise. Okay, so let's move then into stage 6. What's happening there? At this stage, the BPD partner, usually feels depressed, angry, enraged, and generally speaking, will start to really sort of exhibit those mood swings. The inner world is now consumed by internal dialogue that's all about how bad and worthless they are. And their emotional volatility just gets stronger and stronger. And so, like in stage 5, it is at this stage, at stage 6, that the person with BPD can really destabilise and begin to do risky, life-threatening things and, again, become potentially suicidal. So the question then is, how does a partner cope with this? Well, there's basically 4 suggestions that I have to most people. Firstly, you've got to set boundaries. You've got to be able to communicate and explain your perspective on what's happening in the relationship. You've also got to be able to follow your own boundaries. And if you allow those boundaries to be too fluid, you're actually not helping the situation. You're not helping the relationship. You're teaching the other person that it's okay to, cross those boundaries that you'd initially established. So from a values point of view, and you've heard me in previous podcasts talk about being loving, being respectful, and being cooperative, they're a good foundation to begin to establish the right boundaries with. Some of the behavior that emerges during the different stages in the relationship are not okay. And you need to be very clear as a partner in that process to draw the line in the sand and really establish and be firm with, when you do this, this is not okay for me. And part of the process is to also negotiate that, if you choose to get help, then we can actually have a relationship. Because as I said at the beginning, any person with BPD, if they engage in therapy and really stick with it, they have a good outcome. They can have the very thing that they deeply, deeply desire, which is to have love, to be accepted, and not to be abandoned. So it's a really important thing. But again, one of the things that it requires on behalf of the person with a personality disorder is to have and at least open themselves up to go, okay, I'm a major contributing element in this relationship. When it begins to go wrong, I need to do something. I need to take ownership for my part in the problems in this relationship. So boundaries, based on some solid values, being assertive and not getting conned. The manipulative behaviour is going to be there because usually the person's learned that they can make them work. So, on that note, I'm going to leave it and I'm going to get you to really reflect on this because it may not be an intimate partner. It could be a friend or a relative who has this particular condition, which is making life really, really difficult. It's like being on an emotional roller coaster. You know, 1 minute the relationship's good, the next minute it's off, it's bad, and it can be extraordinarily stressful. So I hope this helps, and certainly if there are any questions or anything, please just get in touch with me. Until next time, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspired Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual and group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.